Welcome to The View on Data, a monthly roundtable podcast where women in data share unfiltered stories, career lessons, and real talk about what it takes to thrive in the world of data and tech. Hi, gang. Welcome back to The View on Data. If this is your first episode with us, this is a podcast to share candid, unfiltered insights about what it takes to succeed in the world of data. My name is Faith McKenna, and I'm joined today by two hosts, soon to be three co-hosts coming back in. Paige Berry is back with us, and Jerrie Kenny, new host, joining us today. Since this is our first episode having Jerrie on, can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Yes, I'm Erica Kenny, resident architect at DBT Labs. I have background in data, started in public health, and then transitioned to the tech space. So I'm excited to be here.
Yay! Welcome, Jerrie.
Yay!
Welcome. For new listeners, can we just whip around through Rick and Paige to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Yes. I'm Paige Berry. I've been doing data work, for over 20 years. And now, I'm a lead data analyst, and I love working with data.
My name is Erica or Rick. I go by either or. I am currently a senior manager for the analytics and data enablement arm at DBT. I've been in this industry for 8 years now, but I can say that I am in like the top 99 percentile of tenured DBT knowledge. Periods.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Extreme OG energy from Rick, we have to say.
Yes.
Yes.
Extreme. Love it.
Amazing. And I'm Faith. I'm a technical instructor at DBT and your host for today. Today we're going to be doing a little data show and tell, although not show for our audio listeners, just paint pictures with our words of our favorite charts, dashboards, or messy but meaningful projects, and talking through things that they taught us. I think in the data industry, we love to say we make data-driven decisions. I don't think a lot of us could say exactly what that means. Or maybe we could, but it varies a lot from place to place. So we're going to unpack a little bit what a data-driven decision actually looks like. And since we only have her for a brief time today, Jerrie, I would love to hear from you first. What's a project that you've done recently that you were proud of?
A project I've done recently, I would say turning a client's messy testing, like framework, right? So we talk about data, right? And we talk about data quality. So it's like, but helping them think about why they want to understand data quality so that they can actually make decisions with it. Do they really need quality data in the way that they were defining it, right? And so what I loved about it is that it's a topic near and dear to my heart, as you know, Faith. We've written a blog about it. And so that's what spurred that blog anyway, right? Like those conversations. But what I loved about it is challenging people's idea of what good data looks like for them, right? They have the industry vision, and then there's like, no, but do you really need all of that? And sometimes it's no, you need the imperfect data. If you keep moving forward, it does not change anything drastically in terms of what your data is telling you. So that piece.
Good stuff.
What were some things that made that challenging to execute on?
When you work with developers, with or data engineers, or analytics engineers, sometimes we're so stuck in the details, you do not think big picture. So I think the hardest part of it was like the person I was working with at the time was so focused on just like, what am I supposed to configure? And what are the thresholds, right? Like, what do I want to see? And forgetting why they were doing it in the first place, right? Like, who are you doing it for? Do your business stakeholders, have they helped you define this in a while? And they hadn't. It was just like this, just you're doing the doing because that's just the steps that you're used to doing. A lot of doing. No, but really, I think the hardest part was trying to get them to zoom out a little bit. I find that really hard. People get really stuck in their ways. And sometimes you just by saying, why is it important? Have you talked to someone in a while about it. That part was the hardest part. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes asking questions can be so powerful.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of asking the question.
Sounds like you might relate a little bit, Paige. Have you run into similar themes around data quality and trying to figure out like what actually matters when it comes to high quality data or like validation, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. There's the diminishing returns point of getting exactness with precision with data quality. Sorry, I'm seeing Erica. Your face, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and so being able to ask questions of stakeholders and understand what they're actually trying to do with the data, what decisions they need to make, and that can really help to make it possible to provide data and information that maybe doesn't have to get that like perfect or but can be good enough to reach the goal they're actually trying to reach. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Sounds like you might have similar experience here, Rick. Do you have anything to add?
I mean, it's it's about like the upfront questions that you ask. And I think that
Mm,
that's the part of like the conversation. And that's usually where like you see the highest, most like immediate return of impact of your
mm,
work. Like, for example, I was sitting with like the non-functional requirements review, and that comprises of like security, QA, RISE/SRE around like incident management.
mm,
And one of like this really tenured engineer was like, I don't know why we're doing this because like the data in incident IO is like really shitty.
mm,
And I was like, well, that is like you can use data to see the shitty data. and um and it's like
yes.
things like that where it's helping mold those conversations and then talk about like, okay, we can bring up all these different metrics, but what are you expecting them to do from this is the
Mm,
big thing. And like how, and you know, to Paige's points, like how exact do we need to actually be in order to understand what the root cause is, what we're trying to like look at. And so
mm.
I think that like just having those deeper conversations and having people like change their opinion about how to approach something is like the biggest, to me, like dopamine rush.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so interesting because I'm hearing a lot of data-driven decision making through all of this, and
Mhm.
also maybe some negotiation around what exact enough looks like, perhaps like on a per project basis. Does that sound accurate to y'all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also feel like people conflate the term data driven decision to like, I'm going to have this crazy impact and change the company's strategy. It's like a
Mhm.
lot less sexy than that, but still,
Yeah.
like, I would much rather have incremental steps and like bits of
Mm,
insight because the human brain can't scan all of these things
no.
than be really worried that an analysis that someone on my team is doing it's going to suddenly change the entire company trajectory.
Yeah. Totally. Sometimes the data driven decision is we're not going to do anything different. Don't
Mhm.
change
Mm,
because
Mhm.
we don't see anything in the data that says changing this or that is going to make enough of a difference to matter.
that's so interesting. This is something I found really difficult transitioning into data because I come from a biology background, kind of uh, like a sister field to Jerrie, not really, but I have a science background as well. And in the biology world, when we talk about like data driven, we mean like a p value every time.
Mm.
And having enough data where you can get a p-value that matters and have a meaningful sample size, and that's how decisions should be made in public health and in science. That makes a lot of sense. But in the business world, you don't often like have enough data, have it of the right quality for those things to happen. I personally found that really hard to adjust to. So I'm interested in, a time or maybe an example, Paige or Rick or Jerrie, about like a time where you had directionally enough and how you decided in your head, like, I have directionally enough data to make this choice. and we're going to go with it, and it's okay if it is not like statistically sound, because not everything needs to be statistically significant, I should say.
Yeah. I can jump. So finally, I was in health behavior in the public health side. So you have to be very comfortable with limited data.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
data
That.
triangulation, right? You're thinking from different perspective. How can you validate this way of thinking? Because it's true, you have the biostat side where you're like, everything has to be statistically significant. We're thinking of I was in the, hey, I just want a pulse check. Is
Yeah.
this the right direction to make a decision? Just like Paige mentioned, there's just like the or no decision. Like that's it. I just want to know, because even surveillance data sets in a lot of like public health spaces are self-reported
Mm.
information from individuals.
Yep.
So you are really
Yep.
working with a very limited view, right? And it's slow moving. So I say this because one of my favorite things, I came in and I was like, I thought this space would be moving faster, like types,
Yeah.
when they have all this information to them and they're still stuck. They're still like, oh my gosh, it needs to be perfect. I'm like, no, you got so much and you don't need that much more to know that you can go in this direction, that direction. So for me, I'm just like, this is why I like to ask the why. It's like, but how, like, does it have to be perfect, right? If it's not life or death, which often is not, right? Which is, you don't want to tell them all the time, but sometimes you really are just like, is it going to make the business tank? If you go in that direction, you have enough information that gives you a sense of whether you're doing the right thing, it's good enough, or it's just like trending in the right direction. And what I find is that people don't always know what enough is for them. And so it's just like pushing them to like lower the this idea of what enough information is instead of perfect, their perfect idea of information. So I find myself often being like, you have plenty, it doesn't need to be complete, versus like, I want the complete data set. So all that to say, almost in every space I've been in, it's always telling them, you actually have a lot. You have a lot of your own knowledge, your company level knowledge, your expertise. Lean on that very heavily, because that's what you have to do in health behavior. You have to be confident enough to make these big decisions that can impact policy, can impact populations, right? Or like certain segments of populations. And you have to do that and then convince them that the decision you made was sound with the limited information that you have. So, uh, yeah, hopefully that resonates with
Oh,
some
yeah.
of y'all. But yeah,
It
that's where I come
resonates
from.
with me so much. Oh, Yuri, I'm so grateful to be like in this, like on this with you and hearing from your perspective and your experience like so much. This is incredibly valuable. I I feel like I want to like talk with you every day about this
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
Like, yeah, I feel like me personally, I could use that because I think for me, my perspective is I'm often also fighting my own really strong urge to get the data as perfect as possible.
Mm,
And in a lot of that comes from honestly like imposter syndrome, like being really
Mm.
self-taught in this industry, kind of having to figure everything out as I go, and working a lot of times with people who I feel like I have to make an ironclad case
mm,
and have everything like all the ducks in the row and know for sure, like down to the tiniest little point, because I want to make sure that they like trust me and believe in what I'm saying. And I think that that is something I've had to unwind more recently. Working with the data sets we have where it is limited, and we do have to make guesses and we have to go with like our experience and what our experience is telling us. And I feel really grateful that I work with folks like you, Gary, and I work with like Rachel Gilbert on our team is amazing, like people who are really good at being able to say really confidently like, this is enough information, this is enough data, this is my opinion based on my experience, let's do this, because it's such a really good like forcing function for me to get out of my own way when it comes to trying to get the most perfect data.
it's tough, but yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks. Wow.
Yeah, Yuri, my best friend, she works in healthcare policy where she
Hmm.
like collects data around like identifying biases in the way that doctors do treatment.
Hmm.
But uh I've seen those Google sheets, not the information from clients, not that yet. But
Yeah.
I I was like, this is crazy. It's very much like qualitative. A lot of it is like qualitative data.
Mm-hmm.
And
A
yeah,
lot.
that's a whole other conversation itself, but it's still like directionally accurate. And I think that
Mhm.
it's even like, even before like the enough is enough, I just always ask the question of like, well, what are you going to do with this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
And similar to what Paige has said, you know, I had a lot of imposter syndrome coming into like being a part of the data team, and at one point like running the data team as head of data. And I always felt like we had to like MacGyver the way to have the data models fit and be as accurate as possible. And it's crazy when you just kind of step back and then you just ask. And I'm really grateful for our CFO, Sarah, because she'll ask like, hey, can we look at it this way? I'm like, well, we could, but it's just going to introduce all these other things. I actually feel like if this is the heart what you're getting at, this will be enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
Mm.
like, but it's also
Yeah.
the question of like, okay, is this going to be used something for board reporting where it needs to be accurate 100%
Yeah.
auditing?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this
Yeah.
something that like you just want to have an inkling around? And I think that having that differentiation and the upfront conversation, I think like saves so much headache, because every little thing that you fix is stuff that you have to maintain
Yeah.
your project leader. And
Yes.
after a while, we've just been doing case when ID equals this, and then this, and then you do a little model comment.
Yeah.
Yes.
This sounds like a lot of similar themes throughout here. Like I'm hearing when you all are judging, how exact do we need to be? How much do we really need to pay attention to the data quality? Y'all are asking yourselves, what are the consequences of the decision that might be made with this data? And what is that decision in the first place? If
Yeah.
we're making decisions with this data that are in front of a board that might cost a ton of money, that might be life or death, yeah, we should probably be paying really close attention and being as exact as we can. But if they are decisions that might have potential for greater upside than they do downside, and they aren't in those really high consequence spaces, what I'm hearing is it's okay to let go of some of that perfectionism and some of that we have to be exactly
Mhm.
right, and we can be content with directionally correct.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Mhm.
Remember that era? I don't know if we're still in it, of self-serve analytics. Uh,
Woof.
I I say this because people are scared to make the wrong decision with the data. And so if you know, like I remember trying to coach people who don't play with it as regularly, and they're like, either they're afraid to find the wrong thing, right? They don't know how to piece it together, or they just go completely rogue. And you're like, but you're helping them, trying to help them understand what's possible. What
Yeah.
does exploration mean versus what kind of decisions can you make? If you're making, like Ricky mentioned, is it for the board meaning, or is it for, like, if they're making very important decisions, they shouldn't just be all over the place, right? So people should know what the guardrails are. But when it's exploration and you're just like trying to get a sense of things, like being able to coach people to like know how they can explore and they don't have to depend or like overthink how they look at some of the information, great. But it's tough. That's the issue with when you make also everything available, right? It's just like, what kind of decisions what do you want people to be able to make on their own versus with guardrails, which is what we all wrestle with, right? In our spaces, we've probably seen it in so many different ways, and you're like, that's the issue. Part of the problem is all of that. um yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that perspective, how we empower people to self-serve, to have the confidence to, right, make decisions, to explore, to figure out what their close enough is without it making them feel like, oh no, if you can't get this perfect, you can't
Mhm.
rely on your own, like, attempts at understanding something. Like, no, we want to empower them so they can. We want that enablement to happen. I love it.
Yeah.
I guess on a
It's cool.
yeah. No, go ahead, Mike.
No, please, Faith, you.
On I guess like in a similar vein, do you have stories about a time where you were able to make a call with messy or incomplete data and you were in sort of a more experimental sort of project? Or maybe those consequences weren't huge and the data was kind of just guiding you a little bit rather than providing a clear headlight?
The thing that immediately came to mind, and then I'll have to hop off, lovely people, is this is from years back, so a long time ago. But I worked in Colorado for the Office of Health Equity, and I was helping them determine a way to um, gauge levels of civic engagement, use data to do a
Mm.
check so that they can identify the places they should go in person to do like these town halls and gather more insights, right? Colorado is huge, so you can't
Yeah,
go everywhere. and so,
true.
and at the time, it was with the suggestions, the research methodology that I was trying to put in place, right, was very out of the box for a health department. Right? I was just
Mm.
like, let's do social media listening tools. Let's use do certain types of surveys across like different hubs online, right? Let's look at a lot of these other like foundations and certain organizations and grocery stores, believe it or not, like how
Cool.
people engage with like some of these and just kind of
Yeah.
gather a lot of that information and basically create an index around that and say, hey,
Mm.
based on all these different pieces of information, I can tell you these are going to be the places where you might get the highest level of engagement for these
Mm.
next step of conversation. And then next layer up is qualitative research, right? Interviews and all this stuff. It was so much fun because for the first time, people were thinking, they're like, oh, wow, we can think differently, we can challenge ourselves. And we identified some pretty cool places. The grocery store one was so much fun
Yeah.
because there's like marketing data that you can buy that tells you how to engage, right? And I was like, think like a marketer. Like, what do you do if you're trying to get to people, and you're selling something? And that was what I loved about it was a complete shift in how to think. And it helped
Mm.
us identify some community hubs that we wouldn't typically choose, like smaller places instead of like the big central towns across the state, like things like that. And I was just like, it was fun to see it come to fruition, right? We
Yeah.
got data, we were able to identify some that weren't on the typical list, and then we had a game plan from there. I still remember that project fondly because of that. You're just like, it all came together, and
Yeah.
all that to say, it's possible. It doesn't always fall in place like that because it depends on what part of the machine you're in, but like still, it's cool when you get to see it all.
How cool is that to be able to like experiment on something that like had really good upside and you didn't have to be super exact?
Yeah, it was awesome.
So cool. Yeah, that's an awesome one for sure.
Yeah. I have had a similar experience with data just sort of being a guiding light and not really headlights, maintaining the course for DBT Canvas fundamentals. We get a lot of course reviews in, and some of those course reviews are really just glowing and positive, nice, but doesn't really help you improve the course. And some of them are just people keyboard smashing, which is always funny to me, and others are them asking for stuff in the course, and people will ask for all kinds of things, and it's difficult to know what to accommodate because some of the things that people ask for in our courses we simply can't accommodate. Like a common request is, can you show me how to do XYZ thing in DBT in every data warehouse that there is? We
Hmm.
can't do it. Like we just don't have the manpower for it, the people power for it. But there's other things where I have a harder time asking myself, okay, how many times does this thing need to get requested for me to actually do it? And so far, the metric I've used is like 2 or 3 times because the Canvas course is fairly new. We have like 1,000 people enrolled in it now from its release back in May, which is very exciting. And haven't gotten a ton of reviews in, but we got 2 or 3 people in asking, can you please make harder practice problems for Canvas? Because Canvas is much more a hands-on sort of analyze the data sort of tool. And it's less like DBT Studio, where I feel you are thinking more about the bricks of your data house. Canvas is much better suited to sort of that last mile of analytics. And folks really wanted harder practice problems. So it felt almost freeing in a way to just be like, well, 2 or 3 people ask for it. I guess I'm going to do it. What's the worst that could happen? People don't like the practice problems. That's fine.
Totally. Yeah. I like
Yeah.
that.
Sorry, Paige, were you gonna?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Faith, I was actually gonna ask, what about the learning data that we have? But I've seen your PRs. But I think
Hmm.
that I was just talking to this one founder who like he works at like, or his company is like AI infrastructure, and
Mm,
we were chatting about how like he's always skeptical around data and about like
yeah.
data driven decision making, because as a founder he like balances both like art and science, where he was like,
Mhm.
I know have my intuition, and I think that like the intuition matters so much more. And I was trying to explain to him like, yes, I think that there are a lot of analyses that we have done on the data team where we're actually not surprised by the result because we know the product so well, and we know how we
Mm,
use it, and we know the things that like would be indicators for us personally, which obviously like very much translates to the community. And so um but at the same time I was like kind of telling him that there are some folks that aren't familiar with, what is in your head, especially as you reach like Dunbar's number. I think it's like 120 something. But not everyone has that context. Not everyone builds that like historical intuition to know these things. And that's where data is so helpful to help guide that and like have that tenured, like build that tenured experience by looking at something that feels tangible and like certain, rather than like words on a screen of being like, no, trust me. Um,
Mhm. Interesting.
like, monthly active users is a good indicator for renewal. And so like I think that um there are some parts there where I'm like, you know, sometimes you just need it as a guiding light, and also just to kind of like prove your point to people. But it's also like I'm trying to like really rack my head of like really groundbreaking analyses. Um, but I more so have seen like my feeling like a really strong hunch and being
yeah.
like, I just know that this is a bad idea if we were to make this decision. And I feel like this would be like a good idea. And I always like to see if the data like proves me wrong or right. But I always feel like you
Mm,
have to go in with a hypothesis. Like you can't just go in being like, show me the magic. You have to think of like questions and like have business context. And I feel like that's a really hard thing, I think, for people
yeah.
to hear. Because I remember Tristan told me that when I first came on as head of data, like, you just got to know the strategy and the context. And I'm like, what does that mean? But Paige, I feel like for you being like a very tenured data practitioner, I'd be curious to hear some of your experiences.
Yeah, around like making those decisions when we don't have like perfect data kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of thinking of one recently where um there was a question about a metric that had spiked, and really trying to understand, is this internal testing or external usage? And for
Mm,
me, like this is a question that could lead down a rabbit hole that honestly could take a very long time to resolve. And so what I really ended up having to do is, again, from my experience with data in general, and then with our products, and specifically, uh, I had to decide, like, okay, I'm going to look at these things, and I'm going to look this deep. And if it's not clear at this point, I think I'm going to say that this is good. Like, if I can't convincingly say this is internal testing when I've done all of these things, then I'm going to say this is external usage. Like, that's what that's my gut, and that's what all of the data I've looked at has said. And I'm good with making that decision at that point and saying this is what it is. And if that means that it's, if it looks weird, maybe we want a more sophisticated metric then to answer the question we're trying to answer about,
yeah.
that we are currently using this metric for. That is like that we could even more clearly identify whether or not it's internal or external usage. But that was definitely a point where a lot of my experience came into play, and I was able to say this is good enough in what I was looking at. Yeah, that's the one that certainly comes to mind at first. Yeah, and maybe there will be more as I think about it, but
Yeah, and it's an
yeah,
interesting mix of data and your intuition and how much to put of each into a project, I guess. I
yeah,
have found with
yeah.
the learning data and the reviews, we often get conflicting reviews on the courses, which is
Mhm.
confusing to deal with qualitatively. I had
Yeah.
2 reviews come in on the Canvas course where one said, I want harder practice problems, and another said, there are too many practice problems. And I was like, great. So I can't please anyone. And that was kind of the first reaction, right? And I found that having that qualitative data, especially waiting for more of it to come in, asking how many people are asking for more practice problems, how many are thinking there's too many, how can I use the data to kind of give myself a new instinct for what to do with the course?
Mhm.
Because I mean, if we go really down to brass tacks, right? The goal of this Canvas course is to have a bunch of enrollees and have as many people finish it as possible, or as many people get far into it as possible.
Yeah.
And if, and so I asked myself, like, okay, these practice problems, some people want them, some people don't. I don't think I should get rid of them. But I think that there are probably, like, getting those conflicting reviews told me that there are probably multiple types of learners that are taking the course. Some who really just prefer watching the videos, and that's enough for them to learn, and others who really want to get hands on in it. And where that eventually led was taking the practice problems out of the individual chapters that they were in and putting them at the end of the course in an appendix. And I did that because I thought that, like, the people who wanted more of the practice problems were going to go find them anyways.
Mm.
And they were going to be motivated enough to really make sure, did I see everything in the course? And the people who didn't like them and who preferred to just learn visually, however they wanted to learn, they would feel less intimidated by the course
Mhm.
having those practice problems at the end of each chapter, and might feel more motivated to move on to the next chapter, because it's like a difficult and really interesting thing in learning in general. The concept of, like, your cognitive load. When I taught middle school, we thought about this all the time, where the, like, if you reached kind of a certain point of too many new things, of like too many difficult things, you'll give up, and you'll eventually just be like, you know what, screw it, like, this is just too hard, I'm over it. And I think, like, everybody has a different threshold for that, but I do believe that this exists for every person. And as
Mhm.
adults, we're just, like, much better at, like, managing that um, most of the time. And so when you're designing coursework, it's important to think of that cognitive load and be like, am I just, like, pouring too much onto my learners
Mhm.
right now and making them want to give up? And there's not really a great, like, number for that. It is just sort of feeling it out and, like, trying something new, seeing if the course reviews come in and be like, no, this is still too many practice problems, we hate it. Then you're like, okay, well, maybe the cognitive load is still too high. So it's like collecting little pieces of data to help you here and there, but then also just being like, oh no, I see them just dropping off. I see more negative reviews, and readjusting and just trying again, because the consequences aren't huge. It's just a course. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Hmm. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, I feel
yeah,
Mm.
like that grounding part of what you just said there at the end of, like, it's a course. It's okay. And
Yeah.
it's like very similar. Sometimes like will have like uh oh, this number is like suddenly dipping, like what's gonna happen, like what should we do, and then like kind of stepping back and being like, okay, first, is the company going to collapse right
yeah,
now? No. And then it's okay, if we were to find this, what is actually the amount of bandwidth that folks would have on the engineering side to even fix this? Is this like,
Yeah.
you have to kind of think of things in like the prioritize queue where not every incident in your head is an actual incident or actually something that like you need to drop everything for. There are very like small occasions where that is the case, but I think staying grounded, and I always use that one Simpson meme of like the bus driver tapping the sign,
yeah,
and like I think of that so much in terms of like what is critical, like what is severe, and also what are the metrics that we're actually focusing around driving. If this is just like a random, little thing that is minor in the grand scheme of the bigger picture, can we actually have like push that aside, but like not say that we're going to ignore it, but just say that like, hey, this deserves a place that we could go back to later, but it's not something that we need to derail ourselves around. And I think that sometimes with data that can feel the case, especially when folks don't realize like seasonality is a thing.
Yeah.
Like, maybe people aren't going to be taking courses in the middle of summer vacation or like summer break.
Probably not.
Or like Christmas or like, the holiday season. So I think like those pieces are also like pretty crucial.
The seasonality one really cracks me up because I finished a round of like a product adoption pilot for Canvas, and the last session was the day before the 4th of July long weekend, and I didn't have as many people come, and I was pretty upset about it. And then afterwards I was like, oh, wait, no, they probably just left for their 4th of July vacations. Like, sometimes the basic stuff just plays in a lot more than you think.
Yeah. There are like some we have like this Google sheet. I don't know if people still use it, Paige, or reference it, but it's like notable data events where it's like we weren't collecting, like we lost data at this time period. And so whenever someone sees like this year-over-year weird growth or like dip or whatever, you can reference the timeline and you're like,
Oh, that's amazing. I have to go look and see if I still see references to that. I definitely that's one of those things that can be really interesting institutional knowledge too, because having like looking at a dashboard and having someone say, whoa, the year over year metric here is wild, and I'm like, yeah, I know what happened in 2022. I know about that one.
Corporate librarians should exist, okay? Like, we need corporate librarians.
Seriously. That's funny.
Kind of moving into our closing topic for the day, I think it is a truth universally acknowledged that a great data project doesn't matter if nobody understands it. So let's spend a little time talking about how we visualize data, how we communicate it, and talk about it to different audiences. And I think we have, with Paige and Rick here, two people who have communicated data to very different audiences. So Paige, how have you tailored your visualization projects in the past when you're communicating to execs versus your peers, maybe people a little bit lower on the food chain? Like, how do you think about this?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I actually have a really great book called Storytelling with Data that is actually like on my desk that I have read actually multiple times. It's got excellent, just really great ideas for the concepts around how you're trying to communicate what you're seeing, and like how to highlight the stuff that matters, and not the stuff that doesn't. So that has definitely informed visualizations I build. But it certainly is like when I'm thinking about, I try really hard to mostly think about like what the experience of the person who needs to be looking at the data is going to be, and why they're thinking about it, and like how much time they might have, and what the purpose is. And so I know when I'm trying to explain something to an engineering team about something I'm seeing in the event tracking data and an anomaly, or help try to pinpoint what's going on, that will be very different, like lots of details, very specifics on records, and like time frames. Sometimes I'll even go into the code base and link like a PR or like part of the repo where I think the problem's here. And of course, it's completely different if I'm trying to build a dashboard for executive level reporting, where it's like someone might have all of like 5 seconds to look at this and understand, like to be able to answer like a pretty big question about like how are we doing, and just making sure that that is as clear as possible. Like, if they don't have time to actually look at the bar chart and the numbers between the two, can I make a line that is very clear, like go up or it go down? Like, these like things where just if you just have a couple seconds, can you see, can you get the line to tell you where it's going? Like those kinds of, it's really just a lot of it is empathy and that context. And a lot of that really is, it takes exposure. It takes like time to actually talk with even the people that you're building stuff for and be like, tell me what you are using this for. What's your day like when you're going to this dashboard or reading this message? Just trying to understand as much as you can what their perspective is helps a ton. Yeah. I'm curious about Erica, what you are thinking about this too, your experience.
Yeah, I think that gosh, I was like really mulling this over because there's so many different categories in what Paige just
Mhm.
said, where there is communication around like, hey, immediate thoughts, where I always say like in Slack, I always say like I always see that I always write the RE colon the topic that I'm gonna be talking about. I
Yeah.
then say like this is context colon this is like what I was like doing and trying to solve. This was like the problem, and then like now here are my questions. Um, and trying to like be very direct and lead with context, and like that way they can just have that nugget and then dive into the visualization. I think that um the visualization part really depends. Like I always like if we're talking about metrics, there needs to be a goal. Like like it's just if I immediately look at this, is it like good or bad? I have a lot of opinions also around like visual design too, because I'm
Mm,
a very like visual person and I have very high standards for my charts when it comes to our own dashboards. But also just like clarity of like if this is a subset of a greater number, like monthly active users over monthly active users are in this feature, having that comparison to see like is this good, like what is the percentage out of like this greater whole. And also like one of the things that I remember Tristan told me back in 2018 is your chart should tell the story, and like
mhm.
the title should actually say um what the X and Y axis are doing, and like what is this being
Mhm.
segmented by, so that way you don't actually need the axis names. um
Yes.
like
Yes.
that's what I think about like visuals. But then when I think about like the story, I really love our VP, where he's like, don't link the notebook, just link like the charts and just say like what are TLDR, what should I do with this information, and what is the information that is like the evidence to back this. Where if like you're an exec, you should be able to just read the top line part and just say like I know what this is doing. And also for like even ICs, like that doesn't stop with anyone, because um I think that everyone it's like easier, so it's so much easier to have condensed information,
Yeah.
to then have like going into any sort of analysis or going into any like message, to know, okay, I have set my brain up to know what like you're going to be talking about. Because similar, Faith, you're talking about cognitive overload. It's
Yeah.
like we're
Yeah.
cognitive overload all the time in this async culture. And
Yes.
uh, if I'm going to pull you, I want to make sure that you know exactly what we're talking about here and exactly what the impact is. So that way, for some engineers immediately, then they're like, oh, we pushed this change and that's why this thing is happening. Or PMs are like, oh, we're actually working on something that's going to resolve this. Or it's like, oh, we did this webinar that like might have like pushed these numbers up. And
Mhm.
so I think that just like helps so much to have just like that TLDR. And I think that sometimes as data people, you can get so into the weeds of things, but
Yeah.
it's important to like step back and say like, what are we trying to do here?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, I will use AI for this sometimes. I'll be like,
I think
here's
it's a good use
all the
case.
details, ChatGPT. Can you
Yeah.
make an executive summary? What is actually important here? Because I'm confused. Helps a
Yeah.
lot.
No, I think that's a great use case for it. I mean, when I was an analyst, my last boss told me pretty frequently, like, don't give detail without consent, and because I was like very frequently detail dumping on people, and he was like, this isn't a good use of time. Like, you need to grow in this area. People like, and he's like, not to be mean, but people don't care about the details, and it's not that you shouldn't know them, or that you shouldn't care about them. But when you're reporting your stuff out to other people, they don't care. And if they do care, they'll ask. And so I think like, yeah, what I'm hearing from y'all is like having really good consideration of your audience who is reading your your reports, your visualizations, whatever it is. Having your charts really tell the story on their own. I think there's a good truism that like if you need to explain your chart, it's probably not a good chart. And I also liked, Rick, your kind of summation of for this number making, I guess, would you describe it as a value judgment? If you're trying to communicate through the chart, is this number good or bad? Is that how you would summarize that?
Yeah, or it's like how much of a chunk of the greater whole or like does this actually represent? Because usually
Right.
people want to see like percentage of this over that. And so rather than having both the like the chart and then the percentage, it's so much because then, then it's like 0 out of 100 and whatever. It gets annoying.
Right.
Instead, you could just see the visual of like big chunk, little chunk, and like just having
Yeah.
those two available. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I've been trying to grow in this area with reporting on the Canvas course. And I looked back at some of my old weekly reports on how it was doing. And looking back on those, I'm like, damn, I don't even want to read these. And they weren't that long. They were like maybe 5 bullet points, but all of them were like, here's how many enrollees we got this week, and here's the percent increase from last week, and or the percent decrease from this week. And looking at them now, they're just enrollees, active learners, and percent completion. And like, that's plenty. It's enough. And if you're a really detail oriented person, to me, sometimes getting the hang of that higher level reporting, really understanding the TLDR, I think my brain can mischaracterize it as like being lazy and not doing enough. But I think that's kind of a misconception because understanding your data well enough to report the high level and to pick out the things that are important or like use the tools available to you to help you pick out the important things, that's not lazy at all. It's actually doing more work behind the scenes
Oh
to
yeah,
help people understand what you're doing.
absolutely. I feel like that's part of the job. Like I feel like that's partly what
Yeah.
what I get paid for is to do that.
Right.
Because the people I'm working with, they may not have time or context to be able to do it for themselves.
And
Yeah.
honestly, like I would much rather have a data practitioner come in and being like, I'm very detail oriented, because then it's you can show the work and then you
Right.
can just
Yes.
learn how to summarize it rather than being like, I'm not going to show the work and then here's the output. And then that leaves just more questions. Instead, it's like, here, let me give you the high level context. If you do want to dig in deeper, here's some additional evidence. And
Yes.
it's, we're redoing our analyst template.
Mm.
And so I'm like very excited about that, but it's also like, and also around our standards for what goes into a dashboard, what is actually a good dashboard design practice. And those things are hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
I'm
are super
very excited
challenging.
about them. Sorry. I'm just very excited that we are doing this. I love it. But yeah, because it is hard. So it takes intentionality, it takes attention, it takes rethinking and revising how we do this sometimes. To make it better. I love it.
Now, I know that the answer to this question is going to be a big ol' it depends, but if you all really had to pick, what is your favorite visualization type?
Oh.
Bar chart with line chart, bar with line.
Oh, the combo
Bar
chart?
with line,
Yeah,
love.
those are pretty sweet. I have to say, I don't ever get to build them, but I love a good Sankey. I love a good Sankey chart.
Cute. Yeah, those are good. Those are fun.
I love them. Yeah.
Those
I
are the
love a good
ones.
Gantt chart,
Oh,
Ooh,
the road
yes.
mapping.
Road mapping. What about you,
I
Faith?
like
You have a favorite?
I like big number. I love big number. Like on dashboards where you can just do big number and then there's a little one below it that's like, here's what it was last week or last month or whatever it is.
Percent change.
Big number with small number.
Big number with small number. Make brain go brr. Sometimes brain not work so good. You just need big number, you know?
Or it's like big number
Right?
with like little percentage with like little bar.
Yeah.
I was just like, little bar.
Right. Or like the little triangle that is red and pointing down, or a little triangle that is green pointing up.
Conditional
Down.
formatting.
Ooh.
Yes.
Conditional formatting.
Oh, good. Yeah, totally. Yep,
These
indeed.
are just.
I also recently realized that execs love spark lines.
Ooh, what's a spark line?
With a little spark line.
Oh, interesting.
Is that like, what is that? Is that like in a column or something? What's a spark line?
Yeah, so it's like if you were to look at a pivot table of like, you know, a number or whatever, you can have like one of the columns be like a line chart.
Oh,
Show up
like a little mini line chart.
Yes, and then you can do like color it so that way it's like red line is last year, blue line is this year. Here is the comparison.
Yes, that's what I mean. That's like if you just have a couple seconds, get me a line. Is it going up or down? Yeah.
I love this. These are the takes that the data community comes for. To close our episode today, can we go around the horn and share a piece of advice we would give ourselves, you know, maybe a year or two in to starting data work, particularly around maybe visualization or communicating data results, or like being data driven?
Don't be afraid to push back. Like if something is taking you a really long time, are you fitting a square peg in a round hole? Like, do you actually have to do that much? Or is it that like you just have to have a conversation to push back to alleviate some of that hard parts? I'm thinking of just like error.
Yeah. Totally. Well, let's see. Well, I think mine would be kind of coming back to the stuff around working with stakeholders and asking questions. Is the first principles: ask the problem they're trying to solve, and when you are ready to show what you've done, think back to that problem and just like look at what you're doing with really clear eyes and say, like, is this helping solve that problem?
Tap the bus sign.
Yeah.
Tap the bus sign every time. Yeah. I think
How about you, Faith?
Yeah, to my younger self and also just to me every day is brain dump the details and only share the summary. Because the details matter, but they can just they can live in my messy little private area. And if somebody wants them, they can have them.
Love a good private messy area.
Yes.
You know, it's great.
Yes, indeed.
So many ways we could be using Notion or Obsidian or whatever it is for these things.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening today, everybody. Share this episode with someone who's really building in the trenches of data right now. And please don't forget to subscribe to The View on Data on YouTube or on your favorite project or podcast app. And if you have a project that you want to show off, tag DBT Labs on LinkedIn and tell us about it. Your data story might just inspire someone else. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Yay. Bye.
The View on Data is sponsored by DBT Labs, produced by Katie Chubb, edited by Jeff Fox, and created by Balaji Oyejide. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a 5-star review or share with a friend. Thanks for listening.